Pete Leibman, has spoken to audiences as large as 4,000 plus students. He is also the creator of the Washington Wizards Sports Career Day, an event attended by thousands of students since 2004. Despite being told that it would be impossible, how many times have we heard that, Pete networked his way into his dream job to work in the front office for a professional sports team after he graduated from college in 2003. Less than 2 years later, he was promoted into front office management for the NBA's Washington Wizards at the age of 23. He then managed and trained entry-level staff while being ranked as the franchise's #1 salesperson for 3 straight years. Pete created Idealize Enterprises in 2009. Gee, that's during the fast track year. So that he could give students and recent graduates the confidence and the strategies needed to get their dream jobs and achieve career success of their own. Please, a warm welcome for Mr. Pete Leibman.
Another advantage of fast track.
I will always remember the first NBA basketball game that I went to. I was 7 years old, and my dad took me to Madison Square Garden to watch the New York Knicks play the Indiana Pacers. We walked into the seating area of the stadium, and I looked up. It was the biggest building I had been in my life. There were banners hanging from the rafters, thousands of people in the stands, loud music blasting, bright lights flashing everywhere. And my dad and I walked down right next to the court to watch the players warm up. Now, this was 20 years ago, so there were not the security concerns that exist today. So I stood right next to the scores table 6 minutes before tip-off. And a ball bounced right over to me. And I caught it and looked at it. And I looked up. And Chuck Person, a player on the Indiana Pacers, came running over to me, put his hands up. So I passed him the ball. And he caught it. And he said, "Hey, little man, what's your name?" Now, I'm 7, so I'm way down here. And I go, "Hey, I'm Pete." He goes, "Pete, this one's for you." And he turns around. He's standing 25 feet from the basket. He takes a dribble. And he shoots it. Whoosh. Nothing but net. And he turns his head, he looks at me, smiles, winks, and runs back to his team bench. It was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. And it was that night I decided I was going to play in the NBA when I grew up. So for the next 12 years, basketball was my passion. We had a hoop in the driveway at my home growing up outside. And I must have taken thousands and thousands of shots on that basket. I played outside in the sun. I played outside in the rain. I played outside in the snow. I played outside in -5 degrees. I played outside it was 105 degrees. And given all that practice, I eventually got pretty good. So when I was a junior and senior in high school, I had colleges recruiting me up and down the East Coast. And I figured if I want to get to the NBA, I've got to go to a basketball powerhouse for college. And that's what I did. I went to the powerhouse on the East Coast. I'm not talking about Duke or North Carolina. I'm talking about the real powerhouse. Johns Hopkins University. Let's go college basketball, okay? So I get to Johns Hopkins, and reality sets in pretty quickly. No matter how hard I practiced, no matter how badly I wanted it, and despite being a good player, I was not good enough to make it to the NBA. So what do I do now? Well, I was a junior in college, and I took a class called Principles of Marketing, and it absolutely fascinated me. I loved learning about the psychology behind all of our buying decisions. And I spoke to my professor and told her my love of sports as well. And I learned that there was an entire industry built around marketing in the sports world. And I figured that's what I want to do after college. I want to work in sports marketing. So I was even more excited when I learned that my professor had a contact in the HR department for the Washington Wizards. And they were looking for interns summer after my junior year in college. So I applied for the position. I know I'm the perfect candidate. I've got a great GPA. I went to a great college. I've been obsessed with basketball my whole life. And I go to the Wizards offices in downtown DC. And to be honest, I didn't even really prepare for the interview that much. I just knew I was going to get it. So I go to the interview. It goes well. And 1 week later, I get an email from the woman who had interviewed me. And I had gotten, for J, disappointed, but I realized I only had $72 in my bank account, so I needed to go out and get a paid job anyway. And that's what I did. But when I returned to Hopkins for my senior year, I remained committed that I was going to get a job in sports marketing when I graduated. So I did everything that I thought I could to try to make that happen. But 7 weeks before I'm set to graduate from Johns Hopkins, I have no leads whatsoever. I'm starting to think maybe this is just not meant to be. On a last-ditch effort, I learned that the American Marketing Association was going to have a student workshop for career development for students in Baltimore. And I looked at the itinerary and I noticed that there was going to be an executive from Fila, the sneaker and tennis company, at the event. So I went to this event Saturday, April 3rd, 2003. And I sought out the executive. His name was Hal Birch. And I said, Mr. Birch, you're the reason I'm here today. Is there any way I could ask you a few questions? He gave me his card and told me to call him the next week, and that's what I did. I spoke to Mr. Birch for 10 minutes, and he said, Pete, I'm impressed. I don't have any opportunities, though. I'm not sure how much I can help you. That wasn't good enough. I was graduating in a month. I was desperate. I said, Mr. Birch, do you know anybody else that I could speak to? And he said, actually, I do. Here's 5 names, numbers, and emails of other people that work in sports. So now I had some hope. I had 5 more leads, and I reached out to each one of them. And one of those people was a man named David Cope. And he worked for every single pro sports team in D.C. And he said, Pete, if you want to work in pro sports, it's really not that hard. Just sell tickets for a pro team. They're always looking for people to do that job. And I thought, I didn't even know they had people that sold tickets. I thought they sold themselves. But I took Mr. Cope's advice, and I emailed the person he told me to reach out to, Jerry Murphy, Director of Sales for the Wizards. And within 3 weeks, I had another interview at the Wizards office in downtown D.C. again. But this time I was interviewing for a full-time paid position. And this time I was interviewing with the team president. Now at that time, that was a woman named Susan O'Malley. So I'm excited. I'm meeting with the president. But I'm nervous. I'm meeting with the president. So what do you do when you're nervous? You prepare impeccably. And that's what I did. And I went to the Wizards offices, and I was ready this time. I was not going to let it slip through my fingers again. I sat on the same couch I had been at the year before in the Wizards lobby. And I have never been that nervous in my entire life. Speaking to all of you is nothing next to that. And it felt like my heart was going to pop out of my chest. It was beating so fast and so hard. And my hands were just soaked in sweat. I was so nervous. And I thought to myself, Miss O'Malley's going to freak out when I shake her hand because I'm going to give her a bath. So my desperate attempt to keep my hand dry was seated in the lobby with my right hand under my right leg, right in the lobby. So Miss O'Malley comes out a minute later, and she looks at me, and she's very professional. She goes, Peter, come with me. And I looked at her, and it's the only time in my life I have been petrified by the sight of a 5'2", 105-pound woman. So I walked with Miss O'Malley, and I was ready for that interview, and I aced it. And at the end, I looked her right in the eye, and I said, Miss O'Malley, I want this very badly. And I promise, if you give me a chance, you will not regret it. And she looked me in the eye, and she said, Pete, I love your conviction. 1 week later, the Washington Wizards hired me as a full-time account executive. Thank you. Now, on a side note, you might not know this, but the Washington Wizards had removed Michael Jordan from his general manager position 3 weeks before they brought me in. And while I've never gotten official confirmation from Susan O'Malley, I'm convinced they got rid of MJ to make room for me. So I started working for the Wizards in June 2003, and I brought the same passion and dedication to that job that I had brought to my basketball career growing up. And as a result, I had a lot of success. By the time I was 23, I was in front office management. And I'd always have students and faculty of schools in the area that would come up to me and ask me how I got to that level at such an early age. And whenever I spoke to students individually or in a group setting, I emphasized 3 things. Number 1, you have to be focused. I knew exactly what I wanted. Number 2, you have to be confident. There were doubters and obstacles along the way, and it just didn't matter. I knew I was destined for that job. And number 3, you have to take action. And that's what got me in front of the right people. So I worked for the Wizards for 5 years, and it was a dream job. But after 5 seasons, I felt like I had achieved my first dream, and I was ready for the next one. And it took me a year and a half to figure out what that was. Well, in July of 2009, I decided I wanted to start my own company, where the mission would be to help other people be more successful. So I created Idealize Enterprises. I started coming to NSA. But unfortunately, for those first 9 months as a small business owner, I was completely overwhelmed. I didn't know where to begin. And then one day back in March, it hit me. What was the advice I had given to students when I was with the Wizards? Be focused, be confident, take action. And I admitted to myself I wasn't doing any of those things. So I got focused. Instead of trying to help people be successful, a worthy mission but fairly vague, I zoned in and I said, you know what, I'm going to teach students and recent grads how to get their dream job, period. And instead of doubting myself, instead of looking at professional speakers with 20 or 30 years more experience and thinking, wow, what do I have to offer? I realized I've achieved a heck of a lot for someone who's 28. And I realized that students would be able to relate to me a lot more easily than somebody that was 20 or 30 years further along in their career. And then lastly, I took action. Instead of just writing and strategizing on my own, I started taking the steps to get in front of the right people. And by getting focused, getting confident, taking action, everything has clicked the last 3 months. I have a long way to go to get to where I know I can be and where I know I will be. But I've been able to speak to students from top colleges in the DC area the last few months. I've gotten a top literary agent in New York to represent me, and she's going to pitch my book proposal to publishers next month. And I've started lining up paid speaking engagements nationwide starting this fall. I got focused, I got confident, and I took action. I took the advice I had given several years earlier. I want to close with this thought. Isn't it amazing what we can achieve if we take the advice we're giving other people and we actually apply it ourselves? Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.